Listen up, because what went down on SportsCenter regarding the Raiders' shocking decision to release linebacker Jermaine Pratt is going to make you realize that there are serious, significant, and potentially franchise-destroying locker room issues brewing in Las Vegas. And I'm not talking about typical post-loss frustration or players being upset about losing that disappears after a day or two. We're talking about Scott Van Pelt breaking into regular programming with news that the Raiders just released Jermaine Pratt, who has arguably been their best and most consistent linebacker all season. That Pratt was a healthy scratch for the Colts game and didn't even travel with the team to Indianapolis despite being completely healthy. That when Pete Carroll was asked why Pratt didn't make the trip, he gave the vague non-answer of just decided to go with other guys, without any real explanation. And, most importantly, that multiple sources around the league are indicating there's genuine friction between players and coaches in that Raiders locker room that goes way beyond just Pratt and extends to multiple veterans who feel there are Pete Carroll guys who get preferential treatment versus everyone else who's being judged by completely different standards. When the entire SportsCenter panel, including Stephen A. Smith, Michael Wilbon, and others, started discussing whether this is Josh McDaniels 2.0, where the head coach only trusts his guys regardless of performance. When they showed Max Crosby's post-game press conference, where he looked mentally broken and refused to comment on the team's effort level. When they started speculating about which Raiders players might get traded before the deadline because this season is clearly lost, I had to pause because this isn't just a bad team having a rough stretch. This is organizational dysfunction and locker room fracture that could set this franchise back years if it's not addressed immediately. Hey Raiders fans, if you're following along with this analysis, I have a dream to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel. It would be incredible to have you on this journey with me. Go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's grow together. Your subscription means the world to me and the future of this channel. Now, let's keep going because there's still so much more to discuss. So I'm watching SportsCenter during what was supposed to be routine Monday evening coverage, and suddenly they cut to breaking news graphics with reports that the Raiders have released Jermaine Pratt effective immediately, and you could feel the entire panel recognize this was a significant story that required immediate deep-dive analysis rather than just a quick mention before moving to other topics. Scott Van Pelt's expression shifted from casual Monday show host to genuine concern, because when a team releases one of their better players mid-season after a blowout loss, that's not just roster management. That's a symptom of deeper organizational problems that are festering beneath the surface. Let me paint you the complete picture of what really transpired during this extended breaking news coverage that dominated the show, because the surface-level Raiders cut Pratt headline completely misses why this specific move is so significant and what it reveals about the dysfunction brewing, the specific locker room dynamics where players feel there's a hierarchy based on Pete Carroll's relationships rather than performance. The absolute collapse that happened against Indianapolis, where the team quit in all three phases, and the harsh reality that Max Crosby, looking as mentally defeated as he did in his press conference, is the clearest signal yet that something is fundamentally broken in Las Vegas. Here's the foundational context that needs to be understood before we even get to the Pratt release. Sources around the league have been indicating for weeks that there's growing friction between players and coaches in the Raiders locker room, that multiple veterans feel there's a double standard, where Pete Carroll's former players, or guys he personally recruited, get treated differently than everyone else, regardless of performance, and that the absolutely embarrassing 29-10 blowout loss to Indianapolis, in what was supposed to be the most important game of the season, exposed just how dysfunctional this roster and coaching staff have become. This is a team that came into the Colts game at 1-3, knowing that getting to 2-3 meant 29% playoff odds, while dropping to 1-4 meant those odds plummet to just 5%. And they responded by getting absolutely dominated in every facet of the game, to the point where multiple players and coaches appeared to quit mid-game. Stephen A. Smith was going absolutely nuclear during his portion of the segment because this represents everything he's been warning about with Pete Carroll at this stage of his career. The stubbornness, the loyalty to his guys, regardless of performance, the inability to adapt or hold everyone to the same standard. Stephen A. was making this detailed point about how, when Pratt was made a healthy scratch and didn't travel to Indianapolis, that should have been the warning sign that something was deeply wrong, because you don't make one of your best linebackers inactive unless there's either a disciplinary issue or a relationship breakdown between player and coach. Then, when Pete Carroll was asked about why Pratt didn't make the trip, his response was essentially meaningless coach speak. Just decided to go with other guys. That's not an answer. That's deflection. That's a head coach who doesn't want to admit there's conflict or who doesn't think he owes anyone an explanation for his decisions. And the most damaging part of that non-answer is the implication that Carroll chose to go with other guys who aren't necessarily better players, but who are his guys from a relationship and loyalty standpoint. The locker room dynamics discussion revealed what multiple sources have been suggesting for weeks, and Michael Wilbon was connecting this to the Josh McDaniels disaster, where similar preferential treatment created a toxic environment that ultimately got everyone fired. There are players in that Raiders locker room who feel there's a clear hierarchy where Pete Carroll guys, players he coached in Seattle, or players he personally recruited to Las Vegas, get treated with kid gloves and aren't held to the same performance standards as everyone else. Meanwhile, other veterans who weren't Carroll's picks are being judged by completely different metrics and feel like they're being set up to fail. The most obvious example is Geno Smith, who leads the entire NFL with 7 interceptions through 4 games and has been objectively terrible. But Pete Carroll made it clear after the Colts loss that no other changes are going to be made at quarterback, despite the abysmal performance. Why? Because Geno is Pete's guy from Seattle. Meanwhile, Jermaine Pratt, who's been the most consistent linebacker on the roster all season and wasn't a Pete Carroll acquisition, gets released after 1 healthy scratch. That double standard is poison for locker room chemistry and creates resentment that destroys team cohesion. The Colts game breakdown showed just how completely this team has quit, and this is what had the entire panel genuinely concerned about where this organization is headed. In what was unquestionably the biggest game of Geno Smith's Raiders career, in a must-win situation where the season was on the line, Las Vegas failed in all 3 phases. Offense was inept, defense got torched, special teams made mistakes. But more than just failing, the effort level was non-existent. Players were going through the motion. Coaches looked lost and overwhelmed. The entire operation looked like a franchise that's given up 6 weeks into the season. Here's what really emerged from the entire SportsCenter coverage. This isn't just about Jermaine Pratt getting released or 1 bad loss to Indianapolis. This is about an organization in crisis, where the locker room is fractured, where players don't trust coach, where favoritism is destroying accountability, and where the face of the franchise in Max Crosby is mentally broken and likely counting down the days until he can request a trade in 2027 when his contract structure makes it financially feasible. The Raiders are 1-4, talent deficient, poorly coached, and now dealing with internal dysfunction that makes recovery nearly impossible. This season is over, and the only question left is whether they blow it up and start over, or whether they stubbornly stick with Pete Carroll's vision that clearly isn't working.